Hey everybody, welcome back to our second week of Elephant in the Room. Tonight, our very own, amazing, super smart, awesome Greg Grant is bringing us a message about saving, which is just honestly, you gotta check this out. I hear it's a little explosive.
This is a stick of dynamite. Dynamite is a blasting explosive patented in 1867 by the Swedish physicist Alfred Nobel. Nobel, yes, you heard that name correctly. Nobel as in the person that the Nobel Prize is named after. In fact, dynamite was the invention that launched the Nobel Prize. That's crazy, isn't it? Like, how is that? How is it that this seemingly ordinary looking shell became the thing that started one of the most famous honors that the world can provide? It's because of the way it harnessed power. Dynamite was a way of stabilizing nitroglycerine, which is a very dangerous substance. And it did that in order to make it more practical for quarrying or mining. For this reason, the way that entire industries did their business completely changed. Discoveries were made, economies were boosted, and professions were installed. Jobs were created, all because of this thing here we call dynamite. There's a lot of power in this thing, isn't there? You know, power, when harnessed, can become dangerous in the wrong hands. It only took a few years for dynamite to be used as a military weapon. And 2 decades after its invention, the dynamite gun was created in order to make it an even more effective weapon. We can definitely heed a warning from how dynamite was used. And really, the same concept can be applied to money. I don't think anyone would argue that money isn't powerful. I mean, money is not an explosive pyrotechnic and nobody is carrying around a money gun, but there are so many stories of people out there that have used money to create that kind of damage. The danger, just like dynamite, is found in how money is used. Last week, we explored the importance of work as an act of worship that's deeply embedded into who we are as humans. And this week, we're going to be examining how we understand the money we earn from the work that we do. In other words, what is the wise thing to do with our finances? You know, this isn't like a hot topic of conversation at all, is it? Of course it is, because of how powerful money can be, right? I mean, everyone has an opinion, from cable news to magazines, TikTok and YouTubers dedicated to finances, and whole sections of prominent newspapers. I mean, everyone has a revolutionary, get rich, live your best life, fix the world's problems framework in regards to money. It's almost become triggering and exhausting to even talk about. Don't believe me? Try saying the phrases free market capitalism or democratic socialism in a crowded room and see how that thing splits in two like a Jubilee video. So many ways to eat the elephant, so little time. So here, before we dive into how to use money wisely, I think we must first back up to define wisdom. Because with so many stories on how to navigate finances, we run the risk of doing some serious damage to ourselves and to others if we don't know how to use this thing wisely. So, where do we turn? Where can we find a sound framework to understand wisdom? For that, we'll need to go back in time a bit to visit our good friend named Paul. So if we're looking for a framework of what wisdom is, I mean, Paul's your guy. He was a Palestinian Jew who grew up during the 1st century AD in the ancient Roman city of Tarsus, which at the time was a prominent intellectual hotbed of ancient society. So he was certainly familiar with many different cultural views on what wisdom is, kind of like we are today. In the Jewish community that Paul was raised in, wisdom was a key concept and was found in love and covenant loyalty to Israel's God and to one's neighbor by obeying the laws of Torah. The Hebrew word for wisdom was chokmah, and it implied an intimate knowledge of the law through application to life circumstances. However, his Greco-Roman counterparts defined wisdom within the context of rhetorical power and skill, like the great debater, someone that can argue and articulate their point really well. Hence the word that they used, Sophia, which to them was wisdom from the gods. But see, Paul's encounter with Jesus somehow changed his entire viewpoint of what true wisdom is. And this is why he begins to write his letter to the Christian community he started in Corinth by appealing to them about wisdom, because the Corinthians were all in on the wrong viewpoint of what wisdom is, which can be harmful because when you combine a faulty framework with a lot of power, you can sow division, spew hatred, and separate a community into factions, which is what happened. So Paul begins his appeal like this: I appeal to you, dear brothers and sisters, by the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ, to live in harmony with each other. Let there be no divisions in the church. Rather, be of one mind, united in thought and purpose. So Paul from there begins to deconstruct two dominant cultural frameworks of wisdom and power that they were living out of. Because in doing so, it addresses what is dividing the Corinthians. The very core of how they perceived wisdom was beginning to divide and exclude others from the community. And it could divide us if we are not careful to listen to Paul's warning. He urges the community in Corinth to remember and live into what unifies them. He continues, it's foolish to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven, and it's foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. All right, a little bit of groundwork here. In the original language this letter was crafted in, the word for foolish is literally the word moron. So pause for a second. Take a look to the person sitting next to you and look at them dead in the eye and say, you're a moron. No, seriously. This word gives us a framework. It gives us a framework of how people viewed the fact that Christ was crucified. They viewed it as completely ridiculous. To anyone who looked to culture for wisdom, the cross of Christ was moronic. The thought of a crucified ruler was moronic. To live a life of service and humility was moronic. And even today, we still associate wisdom with success or being well-spoken or having influence or money. But Paul viewed it differently. Verse 24. But to those called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. The foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. Now, here's an interesting thing to know. Paul, by using the word "and" in verse 24, links together the two ideas of wisdom and power, kind of like dynamite. It seems to be driving at the central point that while it might seem foolish to the world, God's wise plan of humble deliverance in and through Jesus is the highest display of his power. Which is why it seems so fitting that the word for power that Paul uses here is what Albert Nobel used to name one of his most famous inventions. The word in Greek is dunamis, and when you transcribe it in English letters, it's dynamis. So the idea is that in acquiring more for yourself, for the sole purpose of making your name great, what you're doing is you're actually missing the mark. Based on what we've learned, true wisdom can be defined as an applied knowledge of what is ultimately true. There's so much more that I'd love to say and share with you. And what I'm about to say doesn't even come close to encapsulating everything that needs to be said. But if there's one concept that I want you to take with you from our time together, I hope it's this one. God's wise plan was to reveal that true power is found in the humility of Jesus. That means that the approval that you're trying to earn, you already have it. You have it in a God who loves you so much. He's willing to heal your deepest wounds from the inside instead of giving you things to cover them while you try so desperately to understand why you're still feeling that deep pain. And how he did it is through Jesus. He came in the person of Jesus, harnessing all the power of the universe he created to detonate the explosiveness of the kingdom and have it completely destroy the power structures of this world that whisper, you'll never fit in without our products, our clothes, our likes, our status. He continued, he came to be wounded so that he could take his life and give it to you for your wounds, his righteousness for your scars, your loneliness for his wholeness. And in his resurrection from the dead, Jesus' broken body was renewed like the shards of an exploded stick of dynamite, miraculously being brought back together, which means he now holds power forever. And nothing can take it from his hands. And that same power is now meant to live in you. And if there's one way to describe that reality, it would be powerful, just like dynamite. Again, wisdom can be defined as applied knowledge of what is ultimately true. And it's yours to grasp. If you are willing to cast off the shackles of your shame, you'll begin to truly see that God is calling you to be like dynamite. If you're willing to accept this as what is true about you and the world around you, the call is to do likewise for others, shattering generational bonds, reversing years of hurt and loss, relieving the medical bills and debt of others. If we all live like this, we could blow up the power structures of sin and darkness and usher in the kingdom to those that are hungry for it. With money, power is wisdom when it's found in Jesus. So how this applies to saving money is both straightforward and complex all at the same time. So let's say there's some really rough terrain that you want to clear in order to build something new, and you want to use dynamite. Remember, dynamite is an invention meant to harness the power of nitroglycerin. So if a stick of dynamite has nothing in it, nothing happens. You'll have the fire, but no explosion. Think about the stick of dynamite as like a savings account. And the fire can be seen as the God Spirit working in the heart of his followers. And the rough terrain as a friend, family member, or stranger having a really tough season, or someone that you would just like to bless. If the Spirit lights a fire in you to leverage your money for the benefit of another, but the dynamite is empty, there will be people who you are uniquely called to bless, who will miss an opportunity to have their lives changed by the radical generosity that Jesus has shown you. However, a stick of dynamite that contains nitroglycerin is nothing without fire. Remember, the fire can be seen as God's Spirit working in the heart of his followers. So, without having any open heart to where, who, or how God is calling you to be generous, you could have a full dynamite, but be just as ineffective as someone whose dynamite is empty. And this concept even goes beyond money. Let me say it plainly. God may be calling you to use the money you have to be generous. However, anytime you get your paycheck or your allowance or whatever, you immediately run over to Chick-fil-A to buy food or get the latest pair of J's or whatever it might be. And look, there's nothing wrong with buying the Lord's chicken, and there's nothing wrong with getting the shoes of the greatest player of all time. It's not LeBron. But if you spent 75% of your money on takeout, you're probably missing opportunities to show the grace of God to those around you. To the world, Saving your money for God to use it sounds moronic. But remember, God's wise plan of humble deliverance will be marked through the faith of God's people being ready to go when He says to. The ideal combo is that of full dynamite, a lit match, and rough terrain. But listen, the only thing we can control is the dynamite, which is why it is important to save our money, because we never know when God will call us to blow someone's mind with how much He loves them. So if you save your money and have an open heart, God will and can use you to change the life of another.